Good morning and welcome back. Along with your coffee, I'm meant to energize you as we transition into the resilience panel to follow. I'm Ian Klaus. I'm a non-resident fellow here at the Chicago Council. Until recently, I was a senior advisor for global cities at the US Department of State, where I led our work on the nexus of urbanization and foreign policy. Along with that, I was the deputy United States negotiator for Habitat 3, the once every 20 years United Nations Conference on Housing and Sustainable Urban Development, where I learned from Eduardo País last night. I spent many wee hours of the morning arguing about periods and commas. A word about slides. Karen's talk, important talk, had some amazing slides. I have 5 slides, and none of them are amazing. And that's the second one. City diplomacy in action. We can recognize Mayor DeVille, Mayor Hidalgo of Paris, Mayor Emanuel of our city of Chicago. No doubt over the next couple days, and it started last evening, we'll hear an array of dazzling data on urbanization. 50% of the world urbanized already, upwards of 60% by 2030, reaching near 70% by 2050. Deftly deployed by a skillful presenter at the beginning of a talk, they should grab the attention of any audience, no matter what is happening in Washington. And yes, the numbers, they do matter. You rob banks, apparently, I'm told, because that's where the money is. We examine cities in part because that's where the people are and increasingly will be. But indulge me for a second in a little act of imagination. Pause the rapid urban expansion in Africa and Asia. Put a stall to the internal migrations happening in countries around the world. Stop the population growth, the demographics, the global migrations, and would we still be here today in Chicago having a forum on global cities? Urban moments. This urban moment is not only about urbanization. Global trends in governance and climate change, in economic growth and economic inequality, in refugee migrations, have at this moment made working with cities and in the urban space more important than ever. Consider, as we'll hear more about today, including in a panel this afternoon, the revolutions in information and communications technology. One of the great paradoxes of the past 2 decades is while it has become cheaper and faster to communicate over longer distances, the value and desire for proximity and working in proximity has only increased. Meanwhile, 2 of the defining companies of the last decade, even less than the last decade, Uber and Airbnb, take the city as a primary unit for social, political, and economic engagement. Or consider trends in conflict and violence. Asymmetries and capabilities, the so-called revolution in military affairs, have contributed to a decline in interstate violence. Meanwhile, new modes of communication and the rise of non-state actors has led to multi-site, multi-city campaigns of violence. The result? While the long-term decline in interstate conflict will likely continue, the city has become the primary site for transnational violence. This merging of the global and the local has had significant implications for diplomacy. Traditional institutions like foreign ministries, development agencies, the US Department of Defense, the OECD in Paris, the United Nations all over the world, are attempting as we speak to figure out how to work with cities and how to work in urban spaces. And this mixing of the global and local has led to an increased presence of mayors on the international stage. If the global has gone local, the local is going global through city diplomacy. Now, that term makes a lot of people uncomfortable. Diplomats hate the city part, urbanists hate the diplomat part, academics find it kind of squishy. So let's use a precise definition for the sake of this morning. City diplomacy. Cities being represented by their leaders, mayors, or municipal officers on a world stage where they engage in external relationships, not only with other cities, but also states, NGOs, corporate actors, and more, including, as we saw last week, multilateral institutions. And to be clear, to borrow from LCD Sound System, this is happening. According to the City Leadership Lab in London, there are over 200 active city networks. 25% of those meet at least once a year. 44% of those produce joint policies, and over 50% of them are international in nature. To better understand this dynamic, the Chicago Council and the City Leadership Lab in London have partnered to produce a city diplomacy index. It will provide at once a snapshot of the efforts of individual cities, as well as a wider global perspective on city global engagement. As part of that, the team surveyed cities around the world, including these 27 cities. The results. The majority of the respondents belong to regional, national, and international networks, confirming the increase in cross-border collaboration. Most of them are better integrated into international networks than they are into national networks. And what are the policy priorities? Internationally, climate change and environment top the list. Nationally, governance and democracy. There's not a lot of budget going into this, and part of the ambition of the index is to make sure that budget is used wisely to serve city needs. But what are the results thus far? Respondent cities said that 60% of the time, network engagement led to a change in local policy. Nearly 50% of the time, they adopted a pilot program. The City Lab, which we all love and is wonderful, cannot be entirely disconnected from city diplomacy. And what of the traditional multilateral platforms? 85% of respondents said that they engage actively with key international accords like the Paris Climate Change Agreement and Habitat 3 in Quito. Importantly, they do so collectively, not solo, but as part of a group. So you have, on the one hand, new horizontal networks of cities across the world, and on the other, collective integration and activity at traditional diplomatic settings. When I was at the State Department a couple years ago, a senior official there sought a meeting with a mayor of a former mayor of a major American city. And the city passed on the meeting. And the staff, trying to smooth it over, said to us on the side, "You know, our budget is bigger than yours." That was true. Even truer now. But that was only part of the truth. Another part is this. I don't know any cities that want to become city-states. I know many mayors who want their capitals to engage responsibly and intelligently to address global challenges that affect their cities. And when and if capitals don't, cities, cosmopolitan, acting patriotically, will engage and take action, and they will do so in part because of city diplomacy. Thank you.